Reagan Vale zipped the last suitcase closed with her knee pressed against it, listening to the sound of her own hands shaking against the metal clasps. For years of clothes, for years of shoes lined up in a closet twice the size of her first apartment, for years reduced to 2 suitcases and a duffel bag sitting by the door of a mansion she was never supposed to call home in the first place. She had found the photograph an hour earlier. Vincent's phone, left face up on the kitchen counter while he showered, lighting up with a message from a woman named Alessia, a model, Italian, beautiful, 25, the kind of woman who belonged in the pages of a magazine rather than the security file Reagan had once glimpsed on Vincent's desk. The message contained no words at all. It did not need any. The photograph told her everything, and it told her fast. She did not scream. She did not throw anything, though later she would wonder if she should have. She simply stood in the kitchen with his phone in her hand, staring at a woman who was not her, and felt something in her chest that had been slowly hardening for months finally, completely set. Vincent Marchetti found her 40 minutes later at the top of the staircase, a suitcase in each hand. Her jaw set the way it got when she had already made a decision and was simply walking it through. Reagan. His voice carried the same low, even control it always did, the voice that had once made grown men in his own organization go quiet when he used it. What is this? You know exactly what this is. She did not stop walking. I saw the message on your phone. I know who Alessia is. I know what that photograph means, and I am not interested in whatever explanation you're about to give me, because there isn't one that changes what I saw. He moved to block the top of the stairs, his hand closing around the doorframe with a tension that told her, even now, even furious as she was, that some part of him understood exactly how badly this had already gone. Let me explain. You had 4 years to be honest with me, Vincent. Her voice did not shake, though everything else in her did. You don't get an explanation now. You get a closed door. She pushed past him. He let her, which surprised her more than anything else that night, because Vincent Marchetti did not let things go. Not territory, not soldiers who crossed him, not anything he had ever decided belonged to him. But he let her walk down that staircase with 2 suitcases and a duffel bag, and he stood at the top of it in silence, and by the time she reached the front door she understood, with a clarity that felt like ice water, that he was not going to stop her. She should have felt relief. She only felt the cold, clean shock of a door closing on 4 years of her life. She was 3 blocks from the mansion, dragging her suitcases along a sidewalk in shoes that were never meant for walking, when the black sedan pulled up alongside her. It was not Vincent's car. She knew his fleet by sight, the way she knew everything about the world she had lived inside for 4 years without ever fully belonging to it. And this car was wrong, unfamiliar, moving too slowly for a stranger simply passing through the neighborhood. The window rolled down, and a man she had never seen before looked out at her with an expression that made the hair on her arms stand up. Ms. Vale. His voice was pleasant, almost friendly, which made it worse. Get in the car. She did not get in the car. She turned and ran, dragging one suitcase and abandoning the other, her heels slapping against concrete that had never felt so unforgiving, her heart slamming against her ribs with a fear that had nothing to do with heartbreak anymore and everything to do with survival. The car followed, slow and patient, the particular patience of men who knew the street ended in a dead end 2 blocks ahead and were simply waiting for her to discover that fact herself. She discovered it. She turned the corner into a narrow alley behind a shuttered restaurant and found nothing but brick walls and a locked gate. And by the time she spun around, 2 men were already out of the car and walking toward her with the unhurried confidence of men who had done this before. That was the moment everything changed. She did not know, standing in that alley with her back against cold brick, that Vincent had been 3 cars behind the sedan the entire time. He had not let her walk out of his life. He had let her walk out of the house because some ruined, guilty part of him understood he had no right to stop her after what he'd done. But the moment she stepped onto that sidewalk alone, he had put 2 of his own men in a car a block behind her, because 4 years in his world had taught him one truth that never changed. Nobody who mattered to him walked through the city unprotected, no matter how furious she was with him, no matter how badly he deserved that fury. The 2 men in the alley never got the chance to finish whatever they came to do. Vincent arrived like something the alley itself had been afraid of, moving fast and silent and entirely without hesitation, and Reagan watched, pressed against the brick with her pulse roaring in her ears, as the man she had just left dismantled both threats in under 30 seconds with a brutal, economical precision that told her exactly how much of his old life still lived just beneath the surface of the man she thought she knew. When it was over, when both men were on the ground and the alley had gone silent except for her own ragged breathing, Vincent turned to her, and for the first time in the 4 years she had known him, she saw actual fear on his face. "Are you hurt?" His hands hovered near her shoulders, not quite touching, as though he had lost the right to touch her an hour earlier and did not yet know how to reclaim it. "I'm fine." Her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. "Who were they?" "Not now." His jaw tightened. "We need to move." "Vincent, who were they?" He looked at her for a long moment, something raw moving behind his eyes, and then he said the thing she had least expected to hear. "They work for Salvatore Greco. He has wanted my territory for 2 years, and he just found out the fastest way to hurt me is not through my business. It's through you." The words landed like a second betrayal, quieter than the first but somehow just as destabilizing. "I just left you an hour ago." "I know." His voice cracked, barely, the first real fracture she had ever heard in it. "And I still could not let you walk through this city without protection, because whatever I destroyed tonight, I did not destroy the part of me that would burn this entire organization down before I let something happen to you." She wanted to hate him in that moment. She wanted the clean, simple fury of the last hour to hold, uncomplicated by gratitude or fear or the terrible awareness that he had just saved her life while she was actively walking away from him. Instead she stood in that alley shaking, furious and grateful and betrayed all at once, and understood that leaving him was not going to be as simple as 2 suitcases and a locked door. "I still can't stay with you," she said. "Not after what I saw on your phone." "I know." He said it quietly, and something in his face told her he meant it, that he was not going to argue the point, not tonight, not in an alley with 2 unconscious men at their feet. "But you cannot walk back to your apartment alone either. Not tonight. Not until I understand exactly how deep Greco's reach has gotten." Reagan did not go back to the mansion. She let Vincent's men drive her to a hotel instead, a compromise neither of them fully liked but both understood was necessary, and she spent the night lying awake in a room that smelled like nothing familiar, replaying the photograph on his phone and the sound of him dismantling 2 armed men in under 30 seconds, unable to decide which image disturbed her more. 2 days passed before Vincent found her again, this time waiting outside the accounting firm where she worked, standing near his car with the particular stillness that meant he had been standing there long enough to draw attention from anyone who understood what that stillness usually preceded. "You can't keep showing up like this," she said, crossing the parking lot toward him despite every instinct telling her to walk the other way. "Greco's men tried again last night." His voice was tight, controlled in the way she now recognized meant the control was costing him something. "Not at your apartment. At your sister's building 2 states away, which means he has resources I did not think he had access to, and it means this is not simply about territory anymore. It's personal now, and you are the fastest way for him to make it personal to me." Reagan's stomach dropped. "My sister is safe. She's safe. I moved her myself this morning, before Greco's people could reach the building." He said it simply, without asking for gratitude, the same flat certainty he used to deliver every fact that mattered. "But I need you to understand what is actually happening here, Reagan, because I do not think you fully understood it in that alley 2 nights ago. This is not going to stop because you left the mansion. Greco does not care whether you're living under my roof or 3 states away. He only cares that hurting you hurts me, and right now that is true whether either of us wants it to be." She stood in that parking lot absorbing the shape of what he was telling her, the terrible, unglamorous truth that heartbreak and danger did not politely take turns, that she could be furious with him and still be a target because of him, both at once, with no clean way to separate the two. "So what exactly are you asking me?" she said. "I'm asking you to let me protect you until this is finished. Nothing more." His eyes held hers, steady, careful, none of the easy confidence she remembered from 4 years of watching him command rooms. "I am not asking you to come back to me. I know I do not get to ask that. Not after Alessia, not after what you saw. I am asking you to stay somewhere secured until Greco is no longer a threat, Because I would rather have you safe and hating me than free and in danger. That was the rehook. The moment she understood this was no longer a story about a woman leaving her cheating boyfriend. It had become something else entirely, and the ground beneath both of them had shifted in a way neither could undo. She agreed, against every instinct that told her she was making a mistake, to stay in a secured apartment Vincent's people arranged for her, separate from the mansion, separate from him, close enough that his security detail could reach her within minutes if anything went wrong. The arrangement held for 11 days before Reagan discovered the second thing that should have made her walk away for good. She found it by accident, going through a folder of documents Vincent had asked her to review, a leftover habit from her work as a forensic auditor that he had once, in an unguarded moment early in their relationship, admitted he trusted more than his own accountants. Buried in a set of financial records meant for an entirely different purpose was a payment history connecting one of Vincent's own captains, a man named Rossi, to Salvatore Greco's organization. Not recently, for nearly a year. Rossi was not simply disloyal. Rossi had access to Vincent's schedule, his security rotations, the exact information that would have let Greco's men know precisely when Reagan would be walking alone on a sidewalk 3 blocks from the mansion the night she left. She sat with that discovery for an entire evening before she decided what to do with it, turning it over the way she turned over every piece of evidence in her professional life, searching for the angle that made the least amount of damage. She could hand it to Vincent and let him handle it the way men in his world handled betrayal, a resolution she understood, even now, would likely end in violence she did not want on her conscience. Or she could do something else entirely, something that crossed a line she had spent 4 years telling herself she would never cross. She confronted Rossi herself. She met him at a coffee shop 2 blocks from his office, a public place, deliberately chosen, and set the folder on the table between them without a word. Rossi's face went the color of old paper. "You don't know what you're looking at," he said. "I audit financial records for a living, Mr. Rossi. I know exactly what I'm looking at." She kept her voice level, though her pulse was hammering. "I haven't shown this to Vincent yet. I want to know why, before I decide whether that changes." Rossi's hands trembled around his coffee cup. "Greco has my brother. Has had him for 6 months. Every payment, every piece of information I gave him, it was to keep my brother alive. I never wanted any of this." Reagan studied him for a long moment, weighing the cold arithmetic of what she was about to do against everything she believed about right and wrong, and made the choice that would cost her more than she understood in that moment. "I'm not going to show Vincent this folder," she said. "Not yet. But you are going to help me end this instead of feeding it, starting today. Tell me everything Greco has asked of you, every drop point, every piece of intelligence you thought was still flowing only one direction, and I will find a way to get your brother back safely before any of it goes further." It was the morally gray choice the situation had been building toward since the alley, the moment she stopped being simply a woman caught in danger and became someone actively shaping the outcome of a war she had never asked to be part of. She had crossed a line that night that she could not uncross, hiding information from the man whose protection she was currently living under, gambling an entire negotiation on her own judgment instead of his. It nearly cost everything 3 days later. Greco's men moved faster than Reagan anticipated, striking not at Vincent's territory but at the secured apartment where she was staying, timing the assault for an hour when her usual security detail had been quietly redirected by information that, she would later realize with sick certainty, could only have come from Rossi's continued contact with Greco despite everything he had promised her. She heard the door give before she saw the men come through it, and every instinct she had built over 11 days of careful, controlled fear told her to run for the fire escape rather than freeze. She made it halfway across the apartment before a hand closed around her arm, and she did the only thing available to her in that half-second, driving her elbow back hard into the man's throat with a force that surprised even her, buying herself 2 full seconds that she used to reach the kitchen and close her fingers around the handle of a heavy cast-iron pan sitting on the stove. She was still swinging it when Vincent's men breached the apartment from the opposite direction, alerted not by the redirected security detail but by Rossi himself, who had called Vincent directly the moment he realized what he had actually set in motion by continuing to feed Greco information even after promising Reagan he would stop. The fight that followed was fast, brutal, and over in under 2 minutes, Vincent's men moving through Greco's assault team with the same brutal precision she had first witnessed in that alley. And when it ended, Reagan was still standing in her kitchen with a cast-iron pan gripped white-knuckled in both hands, breathing hard, adrenaline burning through every nerve in her body. Vincent found her there minutes later, having arrived the moment his men called in the breach, and the look on his face when he saw her standing upright, unharmed, holding a weapon she had used to buy her own survival, was something she would remember for the rest of her life. "You could have died." His voice broke on the words, all the careful control finally cracking entirely. "Rossi called me an hour ago and told me everything. That you found the folder. That you confronted him yourself instead of bringing it to me. That you have been running your own negotiation with Greco's informant for 3 days without telling me any of it. I was trying to end this without more bodies," she said, her voice shaking now that the danger had passed. "I thought I could manage it. You almost got yourself killed managing it." He crossed the kitchen and gripped her shoulders, checking her over with the same barely controlled urgency she remembered from the alley. "Reagan, I understand why you didn't trust me with it. I gave you every reason not to, but you cannot do this alone. Not this world. Not against Greco. I don't trust you," she said, and the words came out raw, honest, months of hurt finally surfacing all at once. "That's the actual problem, Vincent. Not just Alessia. I don't trust that you'll tell me the truth, ever, about anything, and I don't know how to be with a man I can't trust, dangerous world or not." He was silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice had gone quiet in a way she had never heard from him before, stripped of every ounce of the control he wore like armor in every other room of his life. "Alessia was nothing. I know that doesn't matter to you right now, and I know I don't deserve to say it, but it's true, and it has haunted me every single day since you found that message. I was drunk and stupid and lonely in a relationship I never should have let go stale in the first place, because somewhere in the last year I let this life convince me that a man like me does not get to have something as simple and good as what we had. I told myself keeping you at arm's length protected you from what I am. I was lying to myself the entire time. I convinced myself I was protecting you by never fully letting you in, and instead all I did was make room for something that never should have happened." Reagan felt the words land somewhere she had spent 11 days trying to armor over, and she hated how much she wanted to believe them, hated the way her chest ached listening to a man finally say the true thing instead of the convenient one. "That's not an apology that fixes anything," she said quietly. "No," he agreed. "It isn't. I know that." The confession did not erase the betrayal. It did not undo 11 days of separation or the image of Alessia's message, still burned into the back of her mind. But it was the first honest thing Vincent Marchetti had ever said to her without being cornered into saying it, and something in the room shifted because of it, a silence that was not empty, the particular quiet of two people standing at the edge of a decision neither had fully made yet. Salvatore Greco made his final move 4 days later, and it was not subtle. He sent word through an intermediary that he wanted a sit-down, a formal meeting under the old rules both organizations still nominally respected, ostensibly to negotiate an end to the territory dispute that had started this entire war. Vincent recognized the invitation for what it actually was within minutes of receiving it. Greco had no intention of negotiating anything. He intended to use the meeting as cover to eliminate Vincent entirely, ending the conflict the only way he had ever truly wanted to end it. Reagan learned about the meeting only because she happened to be at the mansion that evening, returning Vincent's laptop after finishing the financial analysis she had continued despite everything, and she overheard enough of the conversation between Vincent and his captains to understand exactly what was being planned. "You're walking into an ambush," she said, once the captains had left the room and she was alone with Vincent. "I'm aware." "Then why are you going?" "Because refusing the sit-down is its own kind of war, Reagan, and I would rather control the terms of the confrontation than wait for Greco to choose the moment himself." His jaw was tight, his eyes distant in the way she now recognized meant he was already running through scenarios, calculating angles she could not fully follow. "This ends one of two ways. Either I walk into that meeting and end it on my terms, or Greco keeps coming after everyone I have ever protected until one of us is finished. I would rather it be me who decides which." "I'm coming with you." His eyes snapped to hers, sharp, immediate. "Absolutely not. You don't get to make that decision for me anymore, Vincent." She held his gaze, steady despite the fear coiling tight in her chest. I have spent the last 2 weeks learning exactly how deep this goes. I know things about Greco's operation that your own people don't, because I spent 3 days building a relationship with Rossi that gave me information nobody else in your organization has. If you walk into that meeting without using what I know, you're walking in blind, and I am not going to sit in a secured apartment waiting to find out if you survived it. He argued with her for nearly an hour. He lost. The meeting took place in a private dining room above a restaurant in a part of the city considered neutral ground by both organizations. Low lighting, dark wood, the particular hush of a room built for conversations that were never meant to be overheard. Salvatore Greco sat at the head of the table when Vincent and Reagan arrived, flanked by 4 of his own men, a lean, silver-haired man whose calm demeanor did nothing to disguise the calculation running behind his eyes. "I did not expect you to bring her," Greco said, his gaze flicking to Reagan with an expression somewhere between surprise and interest. "Bold choice, Marchetti. Or a foolish one. She's here because she understands your operation better than you'd like," Vincent said, his voice carrying the same flat, controlled calm Reagan had come to recognize as the sound of a man holding himself together through sheer will. "I suggest you listen to what she has to say before this conversation goes any further." Greco's eyebrows rose, amused, dismissive. "A woman who audits numbers has nothing to tell me about my own business. I know Rossi has been feeding you information for nearly a year," Reagan said, her voice cutting cleanly across the room before anyone could stop her. Steady despite the tremor she refused to let reach her hands. "I know because I found the payment trail myself, and I know because I spent 3 days talking to him directly after I found it. What you don't know is that Rossi has been feeding me information right back for the last week. Everything you've asked of him, every drop point, every piece of intelligence you thought was still flowing only one direction." She held Greco's gaze without flinching. "This meeting was never going to end the way you planned it, Mr. Greco, because we have known the shape of your ambush for 4 days. The only question left is whether this ends with you walking out of this room, or whether it doesn't." The room went utterly silent, and for one long, suspended moment, Reagan watched Salvatore Greco's confident calm actually falter, watched him recalculate everything he thought he understood about the situation he had walked into believing he controlled completely. It was not words that ended it. One of Greco's men, panicking as the balance of the room shifted, reached for something beneath the table, and Vincent's men closed the distance before the motion finished, the confrontation collapsing into brief, violent chaos that Reagan would only piece together afterward in fragments. The flat crack of a single shot fired wide, Vincent's arm sweeping across her body and pulling her down behind the heavy dining table before she had fully registered the danger. The sound of Greco's own security realizing almost immediately that they had already lost the room. It was over in under a minute. Vincent stood at the center of the wreckage afterward, breathing hard, a thin line of blood along his temple where something had caught him during the brief struggle, and Salvatore Greco knelt on the floor with 2 of Vincent's men holding him in place, every ounce of his earlier confidence gone entirely. "This war is finished," Vincent said, his voice quiet, absolute, carrying none of the fury of the last 2 weeks, only the flat certainty of a man who no longer needed to raise his voice to be believed. "You will not touch her again. You will not touch anyone connected to me again. What happens to your organization after tonight depends entirely on how much of it I decide is worth leaving intact." Reagan did not wait for the rest of it to finish playing out. She crossed the room the moment the immediate danger had passed, her hands finding Vincent's face, checking the cut at his temple with a directness that had nothing careful left in it at all. "You're bleeding," she said. "It's nothing. I didn't ask if it was nothing." Her voice cracked, adrenaline and fear finally catching up to her now that the danger had passed. "I asked because I needed to see it for myself." He studied her for a long moment, something raw and unguarded moving across his face in the dim light of that ruined dining room, and then he reached for her hand, holding it the way a man holds something he has finally understood he cannot afford to lose twice. The weeks that followed were quieter, not because Vincent's world ever fully stopped being dangerous, but because Greco's organization ceased to exist in any meaningful form within days of the sit-down, and Rossi, his brother, finally recovered safely through a channel Reagan had quietly arranged herself, left the city entirely, his debt to both sides considered paid in full. Reagan did not move back into the mansion immediately. She kept her own apartment for weeks afterward, meeting Vincent slowly, deliberately, on terms she set rather than terms she simply accepted, and he let her set them without argument, understanding, finally, that trust was not something that could be rebuilt through grand gestures or apologies delivered once and considered settled. It was a Tuesday evening, 6 weeks after the dining room, when Vincent showed up at her apartment with nothing in his hands, no gift, no grand declaration, only himself standing in her doorway with an expression she had never once seen on him in 4 years together. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," he said. "I know I don't get to ask that yet. I'm here because I need you to know something, and I should have said it a long time before any of this happened." "Say it then." "You were the love of my life," he said quietly. "And I spent 4 years too distracted by this world and everything it demanded of me to actually notice that fact until you were walking out my front door with 2 suitcases. I noticed everything else. Every threat, every rival, every piece of territory worth protecting. I did not notice the one thing in my life that actually mattered until I had already lost it." His voice caught, briefly, the first real crack she had heard from him since the dining room. "I am not asking you to forgive me tonight. I am asking you to let me spend however long it takes proving that I see it now, fully, without anything left unnoticed." Reagan stood in her doorway for a long moment, weighing 4 years of history against 6 weeks of watching a man rebuild something he had nearly destroyed, weighing the woman who had packed 2 suitcases in fury against the woman standing here now, who had bled a little for this city and this man and had come out the other side with her eyes fully open. "I'm not the same person who left that house," she said finally. "I want you to understand that before anything else. I'm not walking back into anything blind, and I'm not going to pretend the last 6 weeks didn't change what I need from you. I know." His eyes held hers, steady, certain in a way that had nothing left of performance in it. "I don't want the woman who left. I want the woman standing in this doorway right now, the one who confronted Rossi herself and swung a cast-iron pan at an armed man and stood in a room full of Greco soldiers and controlled the entire outcome with nothing but the truth. That is the woman I should have noticed 4 years ago." She thought about the mansion then, the house she had once called home without ever quite trusting it, and she thought about the version of herself who had walked out of it 4 years wiser and considerably more careful than the woman who had walked in. She was not that naive anymore, and she would never again mistake the absence of questions for the presence of safety. Not with a man like Vincent, not in a world that had taught her exactly what it cost to look away even once. "There are conditions," she said. "If I let you back in, name them. No more folders I have to find by accident. No more decisions made for my safety without my knowledge. If something is coming for either of us, I hear it from you directly, the same day, not after I've already had to defend myself with whatever happens to be sitting on the stove." Her voice had steadied now, certain in a way it had not been in the doorway a few minutes earlier. "I am not asking you to stop being who you are, Vincent. I understood what you were the day I met you, and I am not naive enough to pretend that changes now. I am asking you to stop deciding, on my behalf, what I am strong enough to carry." Something in his face eased, not relief exactly, something closer to recognition. The particular look of a man realizing the woman in front of him had not softened at all, had instead hardened into someone considerably harder to lose twice. "Agreed," he said. "Every condition. Without exception. I mean it. I know you do." His hand found hers again, steady, certain. "It's part of why I'm standing in this doorway instead of somewhere else tonight." She did not answer him with more words. She stepped back from the doorway instead, leaving space for him to follow her in, and understood, standing in the quiet of her own apartment with a man who had finally, completely, stopped taking her for granted, that this time the choice belonged entirely to her, made with open eyes, and she was not walking away from it. The city outside her window kept moving the way it always did, indifferent to the two of them standing in that small apartment, entirely unaware of how close this particular ending had come to never happening at all. Reagan closed the door behind them both, and for the first time in 6 weeks, the silence in the room did not feel like something she needed to survive.